So, who gets to set the rules for a religion? I mean, who decides who's in and who's out? It's a question that sparked, centuries of debate. And today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating case study that gets right to the heart of it all. Ah, here it is. The question that just launches 1,000 arguments, right? Are Latter-day Saints Christian? Now, you think that's a simple yes or no question, but as you're about to see, the answer is, well, it's anything but straightforward.
What's so interesting is that when you start digging into this, it uncovers this deep, often totally unspoken conflict. And it's not just about one church. It's really about who gets to write the rulebook for Christianity itself. See, the entire claim that they're not Christian, it all hinges on what our source calls an unspoken premise. It's like this hidden assumption that most people don't even realize is there. So, okay, let's uncover it together. All right, so to do that, we've got to start with the evidence. What do Latter-day Saints actually say they believe about Jesus Christ? We're going to take a look at one of their core declarations of faith to find out. So this document is called The Living Christ, and it's this really powerful, super Christ-centered testimony that was issued by the church's highest leaders. It states, point blank, that Jesus is the God of the Old Testament and the Messiah of the New. It covers his divinity, his role as the creator, his sinless life, his atoning sacrifice, and, this is crucial, his literal physical resurrection. And this image really drives that home, doesn't it? For Latter-day Saints, pretty much everything centers on the atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ. He is not some side character. He's presented as absolutely central to, well, to everything, all of human history and salvation. Okay, so if you just look at what they say they believe, it sounds unmistakably Christian, right? They hit all the major scriptural points. Which leads us to this really fascinating puzzle. If they believe all of this, then why on earth does the accusation that they're not Christian even exist? What's the problem here? Aha. And this is where we uncover that hidden rule book we were talking about. It turns out their critics often aren't judging them against the Bible at all. Nope, they're using a completely different set of criteria. And that criteria? It's largely based on these creeds that were written after the Bible, most famously the Nicene Creed. Now, it's really important to get this. This wasn't written by Peter or Paul or the original apostles. It was a super complex philosophical framework developed way later in the 4th century to try and settle these intense debates about the metaphysical substance and nature of God. This reliance on the creed leads to a practice that our source material calls boundary policing. And it's exactly what it sounds like. The goal isn't really to understand what someone truly believes anymore. Instead, it's just about enforcing a fixed, preset boundary. It's less about discovering truth and way more about just maintaining borders. You're either inside the box or you're out. Simple as that. And that is a huge shift. All of a sudden, the test for being Christian isn't just about your devotion to Christ or your belief in his resurrection. Nope. It becomes about whether you comply with a very specific, very philosophical definition of God that was developed hundreds of years after he even walked the earth. So this sets up the core conflict of this whole thing. It's a fundamental clash between two completely different ideas of authority. Basically, it's a battle over who gets the final say in defining Jesus Christ. Okay, so on one side, you've got the Latter-day Saint view, which says doctrine is defined by ongoing, living revelation from God. And on the other side, you have the traditional creedal view. This is where orthodoxy, correct belief, is defined by these old historical councils and documents that are seen as final, settled, case closed. This table here just lays out the two competing systems perfectly. I mean, just look at the core question row. For one system, the question is simply, who is Jesus Christ? But for the other, it's, does this confession conform to Nicene metaphysics? Wow. Or check out the definition of a Christian. One side says it's someone who worships and follows Jesus. The other, it's someone who agrees with the Nicene formulas. I mean, come on, this isn't some minor disagreement. This is a completely different way of approaching faith itself.
And this quote just perfectly crystallizes the entire argument. The conflict, it says, isn't really over whether Jesus Christ is divine, it's over who gets to define him and by what authority. The real fight isn't about the what, it's about the who and the how. Is the ultimate source of truth living revelation, or is it these historical, philosophical settlements? Okay, so keeping that big clash in mind, let's do a little time traveling. Let's go all the way back and compare these modern creedal rules to what it actually meant to be a Christian in the very beginning, back in the 1st century. And man, the contrast is really striking when you put it side by side. In the first century, being a Christian was all about your confession, your worship, your personal testimony. But centuries later, for a lot of people, it became all about your compliance with a very specific philosophical framework.
Think about it. Back in the New Testament era, a Christian was someone who did a few key things. They confessed Jesus was the Christ, the Son of God. They worshipped him as Lord. They trusted in his atoning death and his literal resurrection. They tried to follow his teachings, and they accepted the authority of his apostles. Now, notice what's not on that list. Nobody was getting quizzed on Greek metaphysics or the precise philosophical substance of the Godhead. It just wasn't the test.
So, if you use that standard, the original first century scriptural standard, as your measuring stick, well, the conclusion seems pretty clear. The beliefs professed by Latter-day Saints line up directly with those core foundational principles.
They only get excluded when you switch the rulebook. It's when you stop using that New Testament standard, and instead you insist that these later human-developed philosophical creeds, that they are the final, unchangeable, non-negotiable test of faith.
And all of this leaves us with a final, really crucial thought. Maybe the debate was never really about if Latter-day Saints believe in Christ. Maybe the real underlying question this whole time has been this: who has the authority to define him? Is it living prophets and continuing revelation, or is it the historical councils and foundational creeds of the past? That is the question at the very heart of this entire debate.